The road to growth, success of an entrepreneur.
We've raised the bar.
Learn firsthand from successful business owners and create your own path to success.
I'm gonna show you how great I am.
It's time to hit the road to growth with team lead of the Enriquez Group, Realtor Vinny.
Hi, Road to Growth listeners. Today I have Parker Olson. He is the co-founder of FORIJ and co-founder of Scally Studios. I think one of the rare times we've actually had a food founder or product founder, I guess. So that'd be kind of interesting, kind of hear the hurdles you've gone through. Actually, we had someone about a week or two ago, simple syrups. So that was kind of a interesting one that we ever had. But yeah, curious. I mean, thank you for being here today, Parker.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. Excited to talk about food here. I guess we'll give your listeners some insight into some of the brutal realities of really what goes on in food. I think, before I got into it, I really just had no idea. So yeah, excited to be here. I'm excited to chop it up and hopefully, provide some at least entertaining stories for you.
So what's FORIJ?
Yeah, so FORIJ is the food brand that I'm currently working on building. I'll kind of show you actually a little bit of what we're working on. So this is one of our flagship products. So it's a loose bag of granola, right? But what we're doing is we fortify different food formats, different packaged food formats with different mushrooms that have different sort of functional benefits. So for example, one of the mushrooms we use, it is the most bioavailable vitamin D you can consume outside of absorbing the sunlight. So that's super cool. A lot of people don't think about vitamin D when they think about mushrooms, right? Another mushroom that we use, it's called lion's mane. It's sort of becoming a little bit more popularized. Have you heard of that mushroom?
I've heard of lion's mane. I didn't realize it was a mushroom. I heard lion's mane though.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, so we also use a lion's mane extract, and that mushroom is known to be the best synthesizer of neurogrowth factor. So what does that mean? Neurogrowth factor is really what your neural cells, your brain cells are feeding on to actually grow and develop. So out of any like naturally occurring thing that you can consume, right? This is the best synthesizer of neurogrowth factor. It's a mushroom. And so when you're consuming lion's mane, there's more neurogrowth factor available in your brain for your neurons to actually feed on and then actually grow. So there's tons of studies that have been done to show when you're regularly consuming lion's mane, they're seeing increases in creativity and productivity and focus, different brain functions from consuming this mushroom.
So, I mean, every word we say, and I mean, I've had a lot of, being in the real estate field, I've come across a lot of flippers or investors or different things like that.
Sure.
But every word we say has some kind of, we bring our own baggage to that word, right? So when I think of mushroom, because I'm not really good with vegetables, I mean, it's almost like negative. I'm like, oh man, they're gonna have to force me to eat that. So I mean, has there been any kind of like feedback on the push of having mushrooms as like that key thing?
Totally, yeah, and similar to your reaction, people think like our products have like big chunks of mushroom in them. So we're actually using like a mushroom powder, a mushroom extract, right? The whole value proposition is that you're getting all the benefits of these mushrooms without tasting them or feeling them in your mouth or anything. Like you will try the granola or we have a meal bar and you'll think, oh, okay, that's just a really good tasting meal bar or granola, right? Like, so you actually have no idea that there's mushrooms in it. But to your point, if you tell someone, hey, this is a granola with mushrooms, their immediate thought is like, oh, there's like big chunks of mushrooms in there. Like what? So, you can't really see it on the back right here, but you'll notice we don't actually use the word mushroom on the front of any of our branding or packaging. And that's very by design. It took me a little bit of time to learn, but I was actually just going through our warehouse earlier today, and in our first packaging rendition, it says like, I think it says mushroom granola.
Yeah.
And needless to say, that was triggering and not appealing to a lot of people, and that was a good lesson for me on marketing and branding. But yes, you're exactly right. I would say there still is kind of this like taboo, right? People are like, oh, I don't eat mushrooms, but also like mushrooms in the granola or in a meal bar, like that's disgusting. So we definitely, are learning how to navigate that communication and awareness challenge for sure.
And walk us through. So what's Scally Studios?
Yeah. So as you know, been working on FORIJ, have partnered up with another kind of consumer brand founder, and it's a lonely world out there. I'm sure there's maybe other founders out there. I'm sure you can resonate. It's just like nice to chat with other people who are building things, and it can feel lonely. And so we connect regularly. The next thing I know, we're building sort of different things for ourselves. So we sort of combine like some AI technology, like scraping bots, so like to scrape information off the internet, and then some remote labor. And they're running different marketing functions. And so we actually have like collective employees that are running marketing functions for us. And so we house it under a different LLC. And since then, we've actually started working with some of our other friends as well for different functions. So that's kind of like more of a side project and something fun that we're working on that's actually helping grow our own businesses. But I know you mentioned it and I mentioned it as well. And to me, it's just part of this like ever evolving entrepreneurial journey that I think a lot of people go through, right? It's like where you start and what you think you're doing ends up evolving over time to be something completely different. And you really just don't know when you're first there. So
well, you can be open-minded, right? I mean, like talking about your originally packaging, how you had the mushrooms on there and you kind of had to veer away from it. Now having this other company, kind of be open-minded to opportunities, I guess.
Totally. Yeah, totally. I will just say on that note with the mushrooms too, there's been times in the past, working with a food product is a nightmare, right? Like you go to the grocery store and you think, I'm going to pick something up, bring it home, eat it. And you're expecting the same quality every single time. And like in your mind, you're just like, okay, this should be the exact same quality. Like I'm going to the grocery store, it should be quality, but food decays over time, right? Like that's why shelf life exists. And so we've run into some issues where like product has sat out in the sun before it went into a grocery store, and then like it's kind of a higher fat content, and like the product's gone rancid, and so like rancidity is like disgusting flavor. And sometimes it's happened twice. The mushroom component has sort of been like a saving grace of sort, because people are like, this batch was off, but I'm sure it was just the mushroom, and so like didn't really, it didn't bother me. And these were people that like maybe already knew who we were. And so we've actually had people like justify sort of bad product with the like mushroom in it, even though like you really can't taste it, but it's just sort of a funny anecdote.
Yeah. All right. So walk us through who was a young Parker growing up? Did he know he was going to get into the food business? Was he a foodie?
No. Oh man. Yeah, I knew nothing about food. I mean, growing up, like would never shut up, like was always talking to strangers, really, really social. And, going to college, and I was originally pre-med in neuroscience. And, just like fell in love with neuroscience. And something I learned kind of throughout that journey was I discovered a lot of really the scientific background around psychedelics. So that was just part of sort of the educational program. And so anyways, I end up changing majors. I go into finance, entrepreneurship. And in college, had gotten into some entrepreneurial things. So I remember that the first kid I met in college, I saw him on his phone and we got to talking, and he's like spending money on stupid shit. And I'm kind of like, how do you have money? And he's like, oh, like I run this sort of like Twitter business. And I'm like, I will give you, that's all I knew. And I said, I will give you all of my money that I have if you teach me how to do that. And I gave him $3,226 on the third day of college, and he showed me how to build a Twitter account, and that was sort of my first like venture into entrepreneurship. And honestly, I was an idiot to give him all my money, super dumb, but it ended up working out. And he basically showed me like how to grow a Twitter account. I grew a Twitter account from 0 followers to 800,000 followers in 9 months.
And then
so that was like stage one. I didn't, and I totally should have. I think I was a bit more naive back then. But yeah, basically, had a good content angle. It was called Shit Your Parents Say. And I would put up like content of like what my parents used to say that I thought was hilarious or sort of like, cliche. And then you're like DMing other accounts, you're trading retweets. And then when you get followers, you're then, every 10 tweets, you're putting up an ad, driving traffic to a blog, and then making money off of ad dollars.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Huh. So that was sort of my first rendezvous into entrepreneurship. And that's where I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. It became really annoying. You got to be on that platform all the time to be doing it. And I just didn't want to do that. And I didn't realize you could maybe hire someone for that, but it's neither here nor there.
8 months?
9 months. It took me 9 months to grow to 800,000 followers.
Do you recall how much you're making on like the blog and shares?
I think the best day I ever did, relatively by far, I think my average daily earnings were like $200 to $400 or $500, and that would be probably for like 10 to 12 days out of a month, because I wasn't posting about the ads every single day. So what is that? Let's say 2,000 to 5,000 a month. But the best day I ever had, I think was 1,000. I think it was a $1,000 day.
So if you're doing it for 9 months and kind of gave up on it, that means that there's probably some other business you started or something else that took your attention to make that money to offset what you lost, right?
Yeah, you know, oddly enough, I've never really been financially motivated, which sounds absurd. I honestly forwent the dollars. I was like, okay, I don't know, I'm over this, and on like sort of sunsetted it. I got into more like I joined a fraternity. I became president of the fraternity. I got like really into like social stuff. But yeah, then, I decided I would go into management consulting, got a job in management consulting out of school, and I'm doing that. And, 9 months, 10 months into that, I'm like, holy shit, I can't, you're telling me I'm going to sit here for the next like 30 years and do something like this? Like, I would rather off myself.
Yeah.
And so I had this great idea that I had kind of been kicking around at the end of college about a reversible pant idea. And so I went and I got some prototypes made. I actually found my original prototype like a week ago. And so it was a reversible pant. Like, there were different patterns. So like maybe one pattern was a khaki and the other one was like a plaid, right? You could like reverse them. And to me, the big takeaway there was I loved working on it when it was like the fun stuff, right? It was like, like looking at the prototype or tweaking the prototype or thinking about the branding. But I hated working on it for any and everything else. And for me, there was a takeaway there that it was like, okay, if I'm going to work on anything like next or build something, like I need to be super passionate about it, because it happened with the Twitter thing and it happened with the pant thing, where like I sort of like when the work got challenging, I was like, I don't want to do this and I'm not going to do it. And so I needed to find something that I was going to get up every single day and be like, okay, I'm going to eat SHIT all day today because I'm super passionate about it. So that was sort of like a transition stage for me back, I don't know what that would have been, 2018, 2019, maybe. And around that time, I sort of fed up with work and I'm like, okay, I need to do something to like entertain myself and like gain autonomy back. It was really a lack of autonomy. And around the time, I don't know, I had some friends who were going vegan. And I was like, I don't know, sounds interesting. Like my brother had told me about this thing called the tiger blood. Have you ever heard of that before?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, he went on this Whole30 diet and he got he was talking about this tiger blood that supposedly you get. And so I'm like, oh, okay, I don't know, interesting. Like maybe how you eat, maybe you feel different. I don't know. So I went vegan for 30 days. And it was interesting. Like after about 2 or 3 weeks, I was like, it's like, I feel pretty good. Like, I don't know, that's interesting to me. And so I decided after I went vegan, the next 30 days I went keto, like fully keto. And then after that, I went full, I think it was like maybe pescatarian. And then I went gluten-free. And then I did that for 18 months. I just tried like different nutritional regimens for fun.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what I consider fun. And, I'm starting to realize it's not what everybody else considers fun.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot, honestly. It was a really pretty fascinating experiment. And, coming out of the experiment, a lot of people are like, oh, like what's the answer? Like what diet or whatever thing should I be on? And I'm like, you should just go do that exact experiment yourself, because you're just not going to know until you know how you feel. And like, you're able to see like what your lifestyle can actually sustain. But one of the months I was reading about a lot of these functional mushrooms and I was like, okay, I'll just supplement with these mushrooms for the entire month. I'll get off of all like pre-workout, post-workout, caffeine, anything else I'm taking. I got onto these mushrooms and that month was by far the best month that I had felt. And then I continued taking mushrooms and continued to feel really, really good. And so I'm like, okay, this is cool. I don't know exactly what it is. I fundamentally understand that like psychedelics can have really, much stronger much stronger, like powerful benefits, or, you know, can have much more powerful impact on the body than plants can. Maybe there's something here with these functional mushrooms. So, you know, next thing I know, I'm like going to the local apothecary, and I joined the largest mushroom club in the United States, and I ended up sitting on the board there for 2 years, and I got into mushroom foraging, and I like dove really deep on this research and was like, holy crap, like there's a lot of really compelling research about a lot of these mushrooms, where they're talking about some of them we're currently using as cancer treatments. You know, and this is a mushroom I could go probably drive less than 10 minutes from my house currently in Seattle and go pick this exact mushroom. And like people in Japan are taking it as cancer treatment because there's compounds in this mushroom that through consumption are going through your body and looking for cancerous mutated cells and killing them. Wow. Like that's wild, right? So I became really compelled by it, and I started, you know, kind of preaching to all my friends. I'm like, yeah, mushrooms are fucking, excuse my language, mushrooms are cool. I was like, mushrooms are really interesting. Like there's a lot going on here that no one's talking about, and it's very taboo. And, you know, my friends and people at work are like, okay, dude, like chill out. And so then, you know, I'm like doing that, and I started training for an Ironman, and I'm trying to like, you know, I wanted to like have like a regimented meals. And I was like, okay, I know I want to have these mushrooms in my diet. And so I started putting them in my oatmeal in the morning. And then I was bringing that into work, and then I was bringing extra for coworkers. And then I was running like these surveys and these taste tests to be like, do people like these? Like, oh, this is kind of interesting. Like if I can make this taste good, like, and it has this added benefit, like that may be really compelling to people who, you know, are very turned off by mushrooms. And so that like started down this path of nutrition, right? So I have no food background. It was more of this like, well, I'm really into mushrooms kind of type moment for me.
Well, question on the mushroom topic: how many different kinds of mushrooms are out there, or that we at least know about?
So right now, it's a good question. So yeah, so you think about like the fungi kingdom, right, and like the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom. Right now, it's estimated that as a human race, we've only discovered roughly 9% of all fungi species globally. And with that estimate, there's I think it would be somewhere where like there's arguably like 50 to like 300 times more fungi species than there are plant species on planet Earth. Like it's insane. And when you start to think about you know, like evolution, like fungi came well before plants. So like it does make some sense to a degree. So of that, right, of all fungi, not all fungi are fruiting fungi. So not all fungi actually produce mushrooms. So, you know, to your question, it's like, how many mushrooms are there? So there isn't really a known answer. I've seen some estimates of people think, you know, there's maybe upwards of like 100,000, but I wouldn't quote myself on that. I'd have to kind of do some quick research.
So let's say off whatever that number is, 50,000, 8,000, how many of those mushrooms are either poisonous or like psychedelics? I mean, because when I think about it, I'm like, okay, psychedelics or basically poisonous, be aware you can't just eat a mushroom off the street, right? So
totally.
What's the percentage that we know?
Yeah, and so good question, right? And some people are like, okay, what are the different categories of mushrooms, right? Everybody thinks it's sort of black and white. It's like, okay, you either have like a portobello mushroom you like put on a steak, like a psychedelic mushroom that is going to get you high, or like a deathly mushroom. Yeah. The reality here is like mushrooms exist on a spectrum, right? So like you're looking at this broad spectrum, and way over here you have like a cremini or like a brown button mushroom, right? Like you could go to any grocery store in the world and buy a white button or a brown button mushroom. Yeah. They're the easiest cultivated mushroom in the world. That's why they're so common. And then way over here, you know, maybe you have like deathly mushrooms, right? So you have like deathly mushrooms, then maybe you kind of have like psychedelic mushrooms, and then you have like functional or like medicinal mushrooms, and then you have edible mushrooms. So as an example, have you heard of like a shiitake mushroom? Yeah. So like shiitake mushrooms, there's now being a lot of research that's being done that's actually showing like shiitake mushrooms have some anti-cancer benefits. And like that's just an edible mushroom. Like most people don't think about that as like a medicinal mushroom, but yet it has medicinal compounds that we're just discovering. So it's hard to say like how many have certain, you know, compounds. It's probably though, like I feel like what you're trying to get at is like, is it a large percent? Is it a small percent? It's probably a roughly small percent of the sheer number of mushroom species that are actually like deadly, psychedelic, edible, or medicinal. Like roughly, as we know right now, a roughly small percent of it, probably like less than 10% of all known mushrooms.
Gotcha. And like I'm guessing when you were kind of building out your recipe for your product, people already had like there's probably like a Harvard study or something else talking about the different mushrooms, and this mushroom is probably good for this, and that's how we use a little bit of that to.
Yeah, and part of the issue here is, so like if it were totally up to me and there wasn't any regulation and the FDA wasn't involved, I would maybe actually include a couple more mushrooms in what we're doing. But the FDA has a standard that many retailers follow. So for example, like Whole Foods strictly follows the FDA's GRAS standard, GRAS. GRAS stands for generally recognized as safe. So generally recognized as safe, these are different ingredients, anything, right? Anything from white rice to shiitake mushrooms to, I don't know, seaweed. The FDA is going through and they're basically saying, hey, this is us checking all of the boxes and saying this ingredient's safe for consumption. Some of the mushrooms that I think are some of the most medicinal and valuable mushrooms that I've read about and that I understand about are not GRAS. So they're not cleared by the FDA. And so most people are wondering like, oh, okay, why aren't they cleared by the FDA? The reality is that they just haven't even been checked by the FDA yet, because the FDA has this massive backlog of ingredients, right? And so some of these mushrooms just like haven't been prioritized to actually get checked. Several of them have, but there certainly are some that have not. And a good example of that is this mushroom turkey tail, which I referenced earlier, is being, it's one of the mushrooms that is a primary contender for being used as a cancer treatment in Japan. And it's actively being used in conjunction with cancer treatments in Japan. And that is not GRAS. So you look somewhere else in the world, it's literally being used to treat cancer. And in the US, like the FDA says we don't approve it for consumption.
So with your product, I mean, is there like a list that the FDA is telling you, okay, hey, this is next in line? Is there a way to like check it? Because you're like, I really want to add this for the future.
Yeah, that's a good question. Not that I've been able to find, so, and the other thing too, is like the awareness around mushrooms is still small, right? And so a big challenge for us is education, is awareness. And so, we're also trying to look at what are the benefits consumers are looking for, right? So like one of the mushrooms we use is this bioavailable vitamin D. It's a brown button mushroom. And the largest mushroom producer in the US, Monterey Mushrooms, has figured out a way to basically expose a normal brown button mushroom to ultraviolet lights, to kind of certain shades of light that basically makes it produce a ton of bioavailable vitamin D. So I, as a producer, right, of a food brand, and I'm looking at like what are consumers looking for, like sales around vitamin D supplements has like skyrocketed since COVID. And so like that's one of the mushroom blends that we use because vitamin D is very sought after, right? Another mushroom we use is lion's mane, right? Cognitive health is another functional thing that consumers are really starting to pay attention to, right, with mental health and really buying. So like we're obviously using mushrooms we believe in, but we're also trying to find overlap with consumer trends and ultimately benefits that consumers are already like bought into and looking for.
Gotcha. Looking back on the journey you've been on so far with FORIJ, what do you think has been like the biggest like hiccup kind of to work through?
Oh man, that's a great question. Biggest hiccup. I mean, there's been all sorts of issues. There was, I was mentioning earlier, right? A big challenge is like, well, just managing like inventory and forecasting, purchasing, and then, things only have a certain shelf life. But, in order to scale your company, you need to go through larger production runs because you're able to produce the product at a lower cost, right? If you produce more at one time, you're able to produce at a lower cost. But then if you have more, you need a place to store it. If you have a place to store it, then you need to basically be able to sell it before its shelf life. So what most consumers don't really know is, let's say, where do you grocery shop?
Whatever's available. Costco, Ralph's, Vons.
Okay. Sure. Yeah. Any of those, right? Costco, Ralph's, Vons. So they're purchasing from probably like roughly one distributor, right? So like, let's say Ralph's, right? There's probably 10, 15,000 brands of products inside Ralph's. Ralph isn't going to write 15,000 checks to brands like ourselves. They're going to write one check a week, a month, maybe to one distributor. It's the distributor's job to write all the checks to the brands, to bring in all their product into their warehouse, and then to drive the a container load of the 10,000 brands to one Ralph's location and then deliver it. And then the people at Ralph's put it on the shelves and then the consumers buy it. For us to sell to a distributor, we have to have at least 3/4 of the shelf life available. So let's say I make a product that is ours is a year-long shelf life. We have to sell that product into distribution if we're going to sell it, want to sell it on a grocery store within 3 months of production. And we have a pretty large shelf life. I have, other founder friends who their shelf life is 2 months, 3 months. And so you start to look at those numbers and think, okay, how am I going to scale to go through a massive production run if I have to sell all of that product in 2 weeks after producing? Like, it becomes really tricky to navigate. And then if you don't sell it, then maybe you're sitting on all this inventory and you can't sell it in bulk. And then you have to start liquidating it because you really just need the cash back and you don't have the room to store another production run. So it starts to become really tricky. And anyways, I bring this up because we've run into issues in the past where we've actually oversold product into distribution, and then product has gone bad on shelves. And then I've had to drive around California to different retailers and pull product off the shelves and replace it with better product. And there's issues like that happen all the time for small brands. We've had, as I mentioned, right, we've had product where it sat out in the sun and it shouldn't have, and then it went bad before its expiration date. And so that really becomes one of the biggest problems is ensuring standard product quality across all channels really efficiently. It's just a lot to manage.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I guess that's the economies of scale kind of thing, right? So it's easier for you to actually make another product so you can actually, because you already have the distribution and things like that. The structure. Yeah,
distribution takes a long time. And distributor, because they already work with 50,000 brands, they don't really want to take on new brands unless a retailer really wants them. And so there's a lot of sales dynamic because at the end of the day, it's we also work with a co-manufacturer, so a manufacturing partner. So manufacturing partner produces it, they send it to us, then we send it to the distributor, then that sends it to the retailer, then that sells it to the consumers. So there's all these different buying parties and sellers. And so once you build that value stream, it's really valuable to have. And building a clean value stream from manufacturer all the way down to consumer, a consumer who's buying you repeatedly on shelf can take, a year plus and hundreds of thousands of dollars.
How did you learn basically how to build the structure? Did you have a coach? Was it trial and error? Was it just basically, the brainstorming that you're kind of going through with other entrepreneurs?
Kind of all the above. We've had some advisors. We've had some people who have done it before. When we're pitching investors, some of them early on were like, "Hey, it's clear that you don't know what you're doing. Let me talk to you about this." I learned best by experiencing and doing. And so early on, it was during COVID. It was halfway through 2020. And part of the issue we were having was reaching these retailer buyers, right? So you could even get on the phone with them and say, "Hey, we have a really special product. We think this could be a really cool part of your mix." To then have them call the distributor and be like, "You need to bring this product in." So we were selling in some places around the US. And so I bought a pop-up camper van. It's a 1995 Japanese import. So the driving wheels on the other side of the car. It's a Mazda Bongo, if you're curious. And I got in the van and I lived out of it for a year. And I drove around the country and I met consumers, retailers, people who stock the shelf, people who cashiers, right? Buyers, people who are making the buying decisions to put stuff on shelf, distributors, truck drivers. And I would sleep in grocery store parking lots where we were selling product or where we wanted to be selling product. And I would show up at company headquarters when people started to come back into the office, and just to get to talk to people. But also throughout the process, I really saw all of the parties that are involved across the entire value chain and understanding, a lot of them are really valuable. And it's what's interesting is some of the most valuable ones are some of the lowest on the totem pole, right? Like if I could spend my dollars building a genuine connection with the person that's going to stock my product on the shelf at all the stores we're in, I would. That is a huge connection. Those people make product recommendations to consumers all the time. And when they like you, that they're going to make sure your product's always fully stocked. They're going to make sure they're ordering it and pulling it through. They're going to be recommending it to people, right? And you just don't see that when you're just sitting behind a computer and kind of like, running the business, if you will.
That's great right there. That's a great nugget. If we were talking in 5 years from now, where would you be and where do you think your company's going to be? Or your company?
Good question. Yeah, that's a good question. I think, for us and FORIJ and, FORIJ is awesome. I don't think we don't have, mushrooms are pretty niche, like, and relatively newer. I'm hoping in 5 years they'll be a lot bigger, but like, this isn't something that like will sell in all of the Walmarts around the US in a couple of years, maybe in 5 to 10 years. Right. I think for us though, I'd love to sort of have FORIJ at a really comfortable place to buy some of that time back where it's like, hey, like you can start focusing on doing like just cool stuff for the community with the business. Right. Like I said earlier, and for better or worse, I'm not that financially motivated. And so for me, it's just like, I almost use the business as a vehicle to like meet new people and like put on fun events and like create cool community stuff. So I would love to use it as a vehicle for that and ultimately be focused more on like kind of community building through the business engine.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much, Parker, for being on the Road to Growth podcast. Any last words of wisdom that you want to put out there?
Man, words of wisdom. I guess, go out, get your hands dirty. And, for people that are thinking about it, you got to kind of start somewhere. And I would say just, follow the passion, and you really want to focus on the thing that, when the going gets tough, you're still willing to work on it. I guess those are some of my takeaways, Vinny.
And for FORIJ, the best way to find it is?
Yeah, probably on our website. So forij.co is our website. And then I'm on LinkedIn, and that's probably the best place to kind of get in touch. I'm pretty active on there.
And then I'm going to do one last question. If someone has a food idea, right, and
yeah,
they think, oh my gosh, I have this product or I have this thing that I want to put out there. I mean, I know my mom a long time ago was talking about her salsa. She wanted to put her salsa out there. I mean, what's the first thing that someone should really think about on their step, I guess, to putting that out to the masses?
Yeah, I think, well, there's two. It depends on the channel. Right. Okay. What most of the channel I was just talking about was like through retail. There's other really interesting channels like food service that people don't really think about. So think about like cafeterias at a college and university or something, right? Or like at like a school, right? Yeah. They're using all sorts of products and they're buying hundreds of thousands of pounds. And, if you have some sort of interesting innovation, whether maybe it's like cost savings, right? So maybe you're able to save the school cost, or you're able to get it there for cheaper, right? Or maybe there's some sort of innovation that is attractive to different players and different channels. I think that's a value add. Food is really challenging. If you say, hey, I think I make the best salsa in the world, then that's the reason that I'm going to come out with the salsa. There's a million salsas in the world, and the challenge really just becomes getting somebody to try your salsa. That's expensive and challenging, and people are often brand loyal. So I guess I would say, whatever you're trying to do, I would pick that channel, right? So if you're trying to sell online, go online and find, start with one customer and find a customer who will buy your product and continuously repurchase that product consistently. And if you can find that one customer who will repurchase consistently, go and find 10. And if you can find 100, like you probably have something real.
That's a great number there. Thank you so much, Parker, for being here today. Hopefully everyone listening got some great nuggets. Subscribe, go in the show notes, go find FORIJ. And thank you guys. Please subscribe, please share, and go tell your friends. Bye, everyone.